Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. A little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really, really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it. Hey, I hit the wrong button, so apparently we missed the intro, but we're here, we're hanging out.
We're having a good time.
And listen, just like Rob Font on the scales yesterday, I just made a mistake. So ultimately, we get UFC Fight Night Font versus Vera, and Born Out of Mistakes is the show that is from Fight Night Picks. Now, Louis Bond saying, how are my favorite two Canadians? Donald E. Guys saying, I missed you guys. And Donald E. Guys, I saw a very, very interesting prediction that you put out there going against us in the comments section out there this week. And I'll let you talk about that in that chat. But Clay's hanging out. Phoenix, just my 2 cents. Tim Apple, and I'm glad for Cole Hughes that we can get him through the boredom before the fights, Matt.
Exactly, because honestly, that's kind of how this show got spawned, wasn't it? Like, we're just waiting around before the fights, like, hey, we might as well talk about them a little bit more. And that's the great thing about this show. I know this week, especially, we have a lot to talk about with weight misses, like you had alluded to at the start. Rob Font in the main event, missing by 2.5 pounds, which is pretty significant. Like, even if you miss by half a pound, if we're being honest, missing weight by any increment is a really serious infraction. And especially at the main event level. So it'll be really interesting to see if or at all if it hampers his performance this evening.
M. Taylor, 630, saying y'all are goated. Staying with Font. Well, we're going to see as the show rolls on. And listen, DSC TV saying, first time I catch y'all live. I appreciate you for tuning in. Todd Johnson's up there saying it's a phenomenal show. And the Salmon saying, what's up, boys? The Salmon, well, they're going to be spawning here soon. And the Rivers, and that's close to home. Matt, did Ted Williams used to come up this way to fish salmon?
He did, and our great-grandfather didn't like him.
Did not like the Red Sox legend, but ultimately we are so glad that everybody could join in. If you can toss a like, if you could go as far as hitting up the Super Chat, we would certainly appreciate it if you could show some love to the show. But if this is your first time, this is what we're going to do. We're going to lay it out. We're going to go with a couple of Fight of the Night options. We love to recap that as the week goes on. That graphic's going to be a lot of fun this week. And then we play it into the entire card. We start from the bottom. We go all the way up to the top, being this fight in your main event. You have Rob Font, Chito Vera at, I want to say catchweight, but not really. But it's kind of bantamweight adjacent, obviously, with that weight miss. And then at the end, recap it all once more. And coming back this week, offering up a QMK parlay. Now, Wayne Kerr hitting up the Super Chat saying, if y'all thought that Aldo loss was bad, I got Chito inside the distance. Let's get into it. And Kyle O.M. hitting the Super Chat. Certainly appreciate you, Kyle O.M. You also hit up that comment section all week long under these videos. So, Eric Chavez saying, I think it's a throw-off. Lainesse. Matt, we'll switch on over to the Fight of the Night screen. Andre Feely, now listen, you had Tovon Anthony just hit me up on Twitter right before the show started. He said, I want to get your opinion on this one. He said Andre Feely should kind of ease into or lean into the touchy-feely nickname, get weird right before the fight and throw his opponent off. And I said back to him, and I'll say it to all of you, I don't think it's going to work against Joe Anderson Breed 2, because this is a guy, when he took on Mariscal over with LFA, he was screaming at him before the fight in a different language, fighting in the States, and then he went over and just absolutely whooped them. So I don't know if that would change anything with Joe Anderson Brito. I think this is going to be a really fun fight, though.
So do I, but this is one of those weird fights where if Joe Anderson Brito wins, it's definitely going to be Fight of the Night. I do think there's a world where if Andre Feely wins this, it might not be of the same caliber, but this is a very, very interesting matchup because we've seen Feely in there with some of the best in the division, and he's a great litmus test for pretty much anybody. So for Joe Anderson, I really think this is going to be an exciting matchup.
All right, so this is one of the two picks. We switch it on over to the other one. Joe McAllister hitting up the Super Chat. Giant 7-pick parlay. Wow. Joe McAllister going for it.
A wild man.
Matt, we have Rob Font taking on Marlon Vera. Now, obviously, this is the graphic from the start of the week. But on the QMK screen, we update that stuff because obviously, as we know, Rob Font missed weight. Makes this fight even more interesting because at the start of the week, both of us with Rob Font, I mean, only we know what we're going with by the end of the show. But when it comes to this one, Marlon Vera, strongest fights go on. First 5-round fight. And for Rob Font missing the weight, do those two things kind of meet each other somewhere along the middle? We'll find out.
Normally when someone does miss weight, it completely disqualifies them from being on this screen. But I still think this main event is going to be phenomenal. We all know how good Rob Font is. And if you even go back and watch his last loss to Jose Aldo, I think you can still tell just how talented of a fighter he is. And even though we both did have Rob Font at the start of the week, and maybe we still do, who knows, you have to keep on watching to find out. I think we did set the stage to say that Marlon Vera has a great chance to win this fight. And, of course, if it's on this screen, we think it's going to be a competitive one.
Just my 2 cents over there in the chat. And honestly, just my 2 cents. If you caught me at a worse day, I'd block you out of the chat. I mean, you mean a lot to me out there. But saying Chito lost to Douglas Silva de Andrade. He's a glorified jobber.
How dare you?
My guy, what are you saying? It's Fight Night Picks. We all love a Silva de Andrade fight. And he's got a fight coming up soon. So we'll go through the entire card. Obviously, all of our fights still making it to this week. Next weekend, you saw from the start of the show, we're moving forward. UFC 274, Oliveira taking on Justin Gaethje.
I'm so excited for that fight.
Co-main event, 7 years-ish in the making. No, but 2014, so what's that? 8 years in the making? Between Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza. There's also another rematch on that card that's about that amount of time in the making. Vince St. Preux taking on Shogun Rua. So a lot of stuff to look forward to.
Isn't it incredible, though, that both women in the co-main event have not only been able to stay relevant, they've been able to stay championship quality throughout these last 8 years, because they fought for the inaugural title at this weight class, and they are still good enough to fight for it 8 years later. I think that's going to be a really fun fight.
It's wild that a champion is one of the best fighters ever in the division, and they're 11-4. Kind of crazy. All right, we'll move on to the bottom of this card, Matt. Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Candelario. Carlos Candelario is a big underdog in this fight, and it kind of gives me pause. Now, I'm not touching this one, but if I was doing anything with it, I'd probably go with Candelario because at the start of the week, he was what? Just over a plus 200. So right now, plus 199. So pretty good. And for Tatsuro Taira, at a minus 244. Really eager to hear some people over here in that comment section just to see what people are saying based on this fight. Because for Taira, we know how good of a grappler he is. Wrestling, I don't know if I'd say he's a pure wrestler. I mean, especially compared to the wrestlers
that you're going to find. It's a unique style, isn't it?
Yeah, out of North America. Because for Taira, I went back and I did some tape study for next weekend's fight. And when you look at it, Na Liang fought Ariane Carnelossi, and Na Liang went for these weird, like, body lock throws, and she's grabbing around, and she's wrapping her wrists. Tatsuro Taira has takedowns like that. Really strong in his upper body. He's fought all the way up at bantamweight. He's fought all the way down at strawweight in his career. This one at flyweight. And for Candelario, he's coming in out of a big-time gym, New England Cartel. One of the guys to make the weight on this card out of that camp. Now, over in the comments section, Matt, Vache Gustav, Vash, saying Candelario is the slowest flyweight in the division. Can you expand on that? Because I don't know.
He's not the fastest guy, and in this matchup against Taira, it will be interesting to see if he'll gas out, because he does use a lot of his physicality in his own wrestling, so I do worry if he doesn't find that Goldilocks zone early where it's okay. I need to not only get takedowns, complete them, maybe spend a little bit of time on top to get some of his own gas back. I do think that might be a really smart game plan for him, but if Candelario can somehow gas him out and take this fight late, maybe there's an opportunity for him to win with his jiu-jitsu, but I just don't think it's going to happen in this matchup.
I mean, the question there from MPTV, I'll kind of expand on that one, because yeah, there are only a limited sample size of Japanese fighters in the UFC. He has fought a really good level of competition, though. You go over, you look at it, former Shuto champ, the guys that he's beaten in his last 3-4 fights are quality opponents. It's not guys that are like 20-0, and then you look at their 20-0, and it's like 0-1, 0-1, 0-2, and that's the guys that they beat. They are really good guys, but realistically, the pause that I have is because Tatsuro Taira is not a striker. Like, his striking is green. And I know over the past number of weeks, he's been training in the States. He's been training at Extreme Couture. He's been training with Amir Albazi and his teammate. And I made sure I got it right at the start of the week, and I got to do it now. Ryo Okada, the Shuto bantamweight champ. I think he's going to get a little bit more in that grappling department. Candelario, very good with his ground and pound and his takedowns, but that could also play into the hands of Taira. And over at Fight Night Picks on Instagram, we always reference this. We talk about the stories. We post this on Saturday morning. 82% of the fans going with Taira, 18% with Candelario here. So, again, Austin saying, can't wait to see Albazi fight. Me too. He's a really fun fighter.
He is.
And what else? Steve for Prez saying Rob Font is going to beat the hell out of Cheeto.
That's going to be, again, that is going to be a great fight. So we both still have Tatsuro?
Yeah, I have Tatsuro Taira here. It really is a tough one. But again, I like his gas tank. I like what he can do when it comes to his jiu-jitsu.
And I think this is going to be one of those fights where we either sort of reset our expectations for him moving forward and we realize, okay, maybe he isn't all the hype, or this is one of those fights that really does get him placed in sort of the North American audience, and maybe it'll just be a minus 500 from this point out because his wrestling is so dominant. So this is a very good fight to open up the card.
And Mike Harvey saying Altamirano could have been Candelario's win. Dana White thought it was, without a shout of a doubt. I thought Altamirano won the second and third rounds, handily. So, listen, it is what it is. But Carlos Candelario, first guy in the UFC off a loss on Dana White's Contender Series. Flyweight needs fighters. Matt Women's Flyweight needs fighters.
They do.
We have Gina Mazany taking on Shanna Young. Shanna Young. Now, for Young, she has fought at flyweight in the past, but this is her first UFC fight at flyweight. Looked good on the scales. Looks good as far as where that weight was. And realistically, you look at it, took on Macy Chasson. Did not win that fight.
That's a tough matchup.
Took on Stephanie Egger. Didn't look all that great in that fight, lost that fight. Now, to the detriment of Shanna Young, it's always been her grappling. It's not a UFC thing. It's been a complete career type of thing. And I know she wrestled in high school. She wrestled a bit at King's University. But she's more primarily known as a kickboxer, as a striker. And really, I shouldn't even say as a kickboxer, as a pure karate fighter. Taking on Gina Mazany, who wrestles, but her striking's not all that polished.
And Gina Mazany's she's a fighter who doesn't like getting hit. And that's going to be a really important thing about this fight, especially early on. If Young's teeing off on her in that first minute and a half of the fight, it might make Mazany hesitant enough to not go for any takedowns, to just kind of become exposed on the feet, because we have seen that in the UFC. I'm not here to talk bad about Priscilla Cachoeira, because she could knock me out standing without a doubt. That woman has bricks in her hands. But she isn't the level of striker that Shanna Young is, and she doesn't have the distance management of someone like Young. Now, she does have better takedown defense, which does help her stay on her feet a little bit more, but I do think that Young's ability to keep this on the feet will be very interesting. Now, again, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Young is one of those fighters who, when she does lose, it's by the same method over and over and over again. And you would have to assume that at some point, she is going to be able to start working on her takedown defense. We might see those improvements. But I do think that if Mazany can just get one takedown a round in this fight, it's not a sexy pick. It's not going to be the fight of the night by any stretch of the imagination. But this will probably be one of those fights where, if you look at the UFC stats afterwards, Young might have landed 50 significant strikes to the 17 that Mazany landed, but Mazany's gonna have 9 minutes of ground control, and I think that'll be the difference.
Quack the Duck hitting up the super chat and going at it with the diamond. Listen, everybody's against Dustin Poirier, it seems, on the internet.
Did you see he gave out the pick for the second round of the Saints? That was cool.
He wants every single fight known to man, and hopefully you can get one of those undefeated bets saying, why is everyone sleeping on Shanna? You don't have to put it in all caps. We don't have to yell that here, but realistically, I look at it, I mean, for Shanna Young, her best career win is over Pam Sorensen. That's a very quality win to win the King of the Cage Bantamweight Championship. But again, I go through it. I do have a hard time going with Shanna Young based on the fact that Sarah Alpar was able to take Young down on 2 of 3 attempts. Then you had Macy Chasson going 3 of 8 and Egger 2 of 4. And Gina Mazany's style is built on the takedowns. And in some fight, like the Rachel Ostovich fight, takedown, 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 gas tank was there. And then against Priscilla, it was takedown, takedown, gas tank's not there in the second round. So that would be something that if I was thinking about this fight, that might scare me off quite a bit. The votes at Fight Night Picks, 75% of the fans going with Mazany to just 25% going with Shanna Young. Again, maybe this is one that you go live after the first round. If it goes past the first, past the second, you like Shanna Young. But for me, I got to go with Gina Mazany. She has that kind of, I don't want to call it an X factor, but it is an X factor. It is. She has that wrestling pedigree that I think can kind of nullify Shanna Young's stand-up game.
I do worry about Mazany on her feet in this fight, but I do agree with you. I do think that she's going to be able to implement her own wrestling game, and that should be enough to get it done on the judges' scorecards. She might be able to get a submission just because, again, the grappling of Young is not high level whatsoever, but I do expect Mazany to grapple her way to a win.
The only thing that I have to say is the fact, and I see it over there by Wesley Snipes saying, Shanna will pulls the Sam Hughes? Don't want to touch this. It would be a reverse Sam Hughes. It would be she strikes and the wrestler can't wrestle. And it's Taira Nunes. I went back, because again, we're getting ready for next week. I went back and just watched her fight that she had against Ariane Carnelosi. Her takedown defense is awful and she grabs the fence a ton. Yeah. So it's Taira Nunes, somebody that I'm very, very low on. Natan Levy's taking on Mike Breeden. And this is the fight that I really want to hear from everybody. Now, that comment section is lit up like a Christmas tree over there. And for me, right now, it's really hard to follow along. Kenny Williams talking about, LMAO. He legit doesn't know what he's talking about, LMAO. Are we talking about me? Well, that hurts. That hurts. Do I look like an idiot? Maybe I look like an idiot. I don't know. But what I will say on this fight, though, is that Natan Levy, we know him for his pure karate style. We know how good of a striker he is. But he either wins by decision or wins by submission. And he usually tends to implement his grappling in his fights. Mike Breeden is just a knock him down, drag him out type of fighter. So I think this is going to be a really fun one. But what are we saying here? Because, I mean, you've got Crispy68 saying, let's go Font. Chris Paycheck, that I trust, says Candelario's fight is off. So, listen, Chris, I'm going to look that one up. You better not be goofing on everybody. MPTV saying, not the nicest things about Natan Levy. And Clay is saying, no idea. Like the over. Threw it in a parlay. Gun to my head, I'll pick Levy. Go ahead.
Okay, there's the transition. So for Mike Breeden, here's the thing. He could be in a fight of the night with a box full of pool noodles. That's just his style of fighting. No matter who's in there with him, he can kind of get a brawl out of them, and that's the last thing Natan Levy wants in his
son
life.
Of a gun! Taira and Carlos Candelario is off the fight card. So thank you, Chris. This is the tweet by Nolan King, friend of the show. Sorry.
Perfect.
Continue.
So for Levy, you're right. We talk about his karate quite a bit, but he's one of these strange fighters who's really been able to implement his wrestling with his karate style. He'll shoot from a long distance away because that's how he likes to stand for his own striking. And normally that's the worst thing a person can do. If they do start shooting in from long distance, you can time an uppercut that way, you can time a knee that way. But Levy kind of pulls it off if we're being honest. Like, his in and out burst is very fast, and I do think that's what's going to be able to win him this fight. Again, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't been all that impressed with what we saw out of Levy in his last fight. It was his first UFC fight. Maybe he'll get a little bit better. And Breeden stylistically is a pretty good matchup for him. So I'm expecting quite a bit out of Levy, just to sort of change my opinion of him overall. But I think this should be a fun fight between these two.
I mean, it's a good thing that we do this show beforehand, because then at least you know that Tatsuro, Taira, and Carlos Candelario is off. And yeah, for me, again, with Mike Breeden, not really the quickest striker. He's good when he throws in combination. He tends to take a long time to reset. And when I look at everything, I do have a hard time going with poor Mike Breeden. Now, I say poor Mike Breeden because he threw him to the wolves in his first UFC fight. Like, again, yes, Alexandr Hernandez got thrown to the wolves in his UFC debut. And it was like, I don't know. It was like whatever you had Liam Neeson trying to do in the movie The Grey, it was the opposite, because he just went in there and beat the shit out of that wolf and just sent him flying. And for poor old Liam Neeson at the end of that movie, like, they just pan away, and you know Liam's dead, so not Alexandr Hernandez.
You're all over the place with this.
He was able
now
to get the win over Beneil Dariush, but for Breeden, when he took on Alexandr Hernandez, it wasn't so. He got totally outstruck. He got finished very, very early on as well. So when we do look at this one, for Natan Levy, I'll have a look at the odds. He's a minus 200 favorite right now. When you look at it for Mike Breeden, money Mike Breeden coming back at a plus 167. And Otis, the beefy one, saying the Gray was underrated. I went to see that in theaters, and then before Zeller's closed in Canada, I remember going there with you and our dad. And even when Zeller's had their "we're going away" bankruptcy sale, it was $32 for the movie The Gray. I'll never forget that. But the voters, 84% going with Natan Levy. I also have Natan Levy as one half the QMK parlay this week. Because for me, I think Levy's got an advantage in just about every aspect of this fight. And for Mike Breeden, a little bit of a surprise to end up in the UFC.
Breeden could still knock out Levy, though, for being honest. Like, Levy does have that weird distance management. I don't even want to call it an issue. It's just he does shoot from really long distance away. And Mike Breeden does have the kind of power that could knock him out if he's able to time something. But I do agree with you. I do think that Levy is a higher level than Mike Breeden.
All right, so both of us going with Natan Levy there. And then we move into our next fight, Matt. And there's two fights on this card where a lot of people were like, you know what? I see where they're going with this one, but I disagree with them. And this is one of those fights because start of the week, both of us going with Gabe Green to get the win over fellow Canadian, Quebecer, Yohan Lainesse, the former CFFC welterweight champ. You get a big win on Dana White's Contender Series where everybody, commentary, ourselves, everybody except for, his corner in the south of Montreal, they were all over Yohan Lainesse, but everybody else was not. So when it does come to this fight, Matt, Gabe Green's been away because in training he got hit in the heart and had different symptoms of a heart attack, but not a heart attack, but had to get looked after and had to be in, the hospital. And so those things, you definitely don't love them. But when it comes to Yohan Lainesse, this guy's been rolling, continues to win. Obviously, you see it in his record. It is very, very good. So, Matt, when it comes to this one, you have Gabe Green, 1-1 in the UFC, but the Phil Rowe fight, that one ages well. But it has been some time since we've seen Green in the octagon.
I hate saying, this fight isn't going to go to a decision, but if any fight on this card isn't going to go to a decision, it's probably going to be this one. Like, Yohan has bricks in his hands, can throw in combination, and with this fight against Gabe Green, he's going to be fighting a guy that's constantly going to be coming towards him, so he's going to be able to time up some of his own big shots. Now, here's the problem, though. If he's not able to time up some of his own big shots, he's going to be eating some absolute windmill punches from Gabe Green. And the thing is, if Lainesse does struggle on the feet, I don't think he has the wrestling in his back pocket to take Gabe Green down. On the flip side, though, I do think that if Green really needs to go get a takedown, probably not against the highest level of fighters in this division, he won't be able to. But in this matchup against Yohan, since he is so upright, I do think the takedown could be available for Gabe Green, especially if he is able to hide it with some of his ducks and his overhands. Again, I always call it the Chad Mendes game plan, but he got to a title shot with basically just shooting double leg takedowns and overhand rights and lefts. Gabe Green can kind of play that game a little bit, and I do think that if he follows that game plan, it should result in a win against Yohan Lainesse. But again, this fight should be incredible.
And if you think about it, for Gabe Green, he comes in on super short notice when he took on Daniel Rodriguez, and in that fight, he did get beaten. There were 30-27s, but you have to consider everything under a microscope. It's like when Matt, and I agreed with you, when Rob Font took on Jose Aldo, did he have a terrible fight? Not necessarily. He did get 50-45 by two of the judges. He did get knocked down twice, but he fought a halfway competitive fight, and he threw a lot of volume. For me, when Gabe Green took on Daniel Rodriguez, I can look at the score and I can look at the totals, and then when I watch the fight, something different played out there. It did impress me out of him. Now, obviously, Daniel Rodriguez will throw a lot more volume than Yohan Lainesse. He also has odd submissions. Tim Means found that one out. For Lainesse, really, really long on his shots. Really good pop at the end of them. But for me, I just do look at it, and I got to go with Gabe Green. And I did see it over there. Kyle Kelly wanted to hear a bam. I can't give you a bam, but I can give you a green eggs and a ham. Wow. Philadelphia Collins.
I just wanted to point out, because you brought up Tim Means, so I feel like I have to say this, fighting Kevin Holland, and I'm far too excited for that fight.
Yeah, that one's kind of...
That's a tough matchup for the Dirty Bird.
Yeah, 65% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Yohan Lainesse, 35% going with Gabe Green. Gabe Green, the biggest mover and shaker on this card from open, 54% clip. He opened a plus 160. He's a plus 136 right now. For Lainesse, open minus 185, plus 113. If you like Lainesse, I can see where you're going with it. But for me, I do have Gabe Green, although I'm really looking forward to this one. And if Yohan Lainesse gets a Gabe Green that's just lost the step because of the injury issues, he had eye surgery too before his scheduled fight. Then he had the heart issues. Excuse me. This could be an opportunity. Clay going with Lainesse round 1 KO. Or TKO, Green round 3 at nice odds, but also saying, fight doesn't go the distance is a possibility. So I think this should be a really fun fight, and I also think, Matt, that Figgy Smalls, this would be Figgy Smalls, because Figgy Smalls' younger brother, Francisco, taking on Daniel De Silva. You know how I said that at the start of the week? People are still there at the end of this week.
What's harder to figure out, Johnny Eduardo's birthday or De Silva's actual last name?
I don't know.
It's one of the two.
It's De Silva when you look at the USADA testing pool. So I'm going to assume it's Daniel De Silva, but Lacerda's still out there. So when it does come to this fight, though, Matt, I look at Daniel De Silva. And when I watched the fight tape for this guy coming into the UFC, he was one of the more exciting prospects that jumped off the page to me. He's got jiu-jitsu, he's got wild strikes, he can do it from both sides. When he's fighting from orthodox, great boxing. When he switches it to southpaw, really rangy kicks that he has. And he reminds me, unfortunately, of a guy who is normally in his corner, who's no longer in the UFC. That might come as a shock to a lot of people. It's Alex Oliveira out of ATS team. But I look at Daniel De Silva, not the most technical guy. Look at Francisco Figueiredo. Sometimes it's like he thinks too much and he's trying to be too technical and he doesn't do enough. So we'll see how this one plays out. Start of the week, we were split on the pick, Matt. There's over 400 tuning in right now.
Hello, everyone.
Less than a quarter of them have thrown up a like. That one's free. You get an opportunity there. But over in the comments section, Matt, Iceman MMA. Wow, the best fight on the card other than the main event is out. Awesome. Was looking forward to Candelario and Tatsuro. Taira. Kyle Kelly saying, when you order the God of War from Wish and Francisco shows up in your doorstep, you go, oh.
And that's the
right
weird thing. It's the weird thing about Francisco, too, because he does fight a lot like his brother. He just doesn't have the sliders turned all the way up to 100. Like, he does have that laid-back kind of style. He does try to do the pull, too. But the problem is, the results aren't the same when he lands that strike. Like, when Davison Figueiredo hits people forget just because he's had fights with Brandon Moreno, and those guys are very closely matched, so they look very similar. Figueiredo destroys most people when he touches them on the feet. And again, when Francisco tries to fight in that style, I agree with what you said 100%. It is almost like he overthinks it to where he's like, okay, I want to make sure my technique's really good on all this. But MMA is one of the few sports where the less technical you are and the more aggressive you are can sometimes help you. I'm not saying always.
Look at Joe Anderson Brito.
But look at even look at like Jessica Andrade though, John Lineker. There's a lot of fighters out there who use their aggression as a massive positive. And yes, they're going to lose here or there as a result of their style, but for the most part, it's a huge positive instead of a negative. For Daniel da Silva, I just think his distance striking is at a much higher level than what Francisco Figueiredo's is at this point. Now, could Figueiredo go in there, get some body-to-body takedowns, and dominate this fight on the mat? I think he could. It's been done before. He could do it again, but I do see this as being the end of the line for Francisco Figueiredo. He just hasn't really impressed me all that much at the UFC level, and I don't really feel like we have seen him gain any new wrinkle to his game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm looking over in the comments section. I want to make sure I get to everybody over there. So, Tibby the Broker saying, how you feel about Romanov after he canceled last week? He didn't. It was Chase Sherman. Ricardo Guzman saying, the Bruce Lee from Wish starting off the card with a banger submission? I'm assuming you're talking about Tatsuro Taira maybe, but he's not on the card anymore, so apologies there. Just my 2 cents. Yohan hasn't fought anyone, but another hype job. Green literally took bombs from D-Rod. That much is true. Ethan saying, think Da Silva wins an ugly decision. I think this one's going to be an ugly decision. So let's have a look at the odds in this one. Slight favorite is Daniel Da Silva Lacerda. Open to plus 110. He's minus 128 right now. Figueiredo open to minus 130. He's plus 108. And if we have a look to make it spicy, we'll go over to Fight Night Picks on the Instagram. 70% going with Daniel Da Silva Lacerda to 30% for Figueiredo. And so, listen, who do we have that we can go to in the comments section? Vash Gustav going all over Figueiredo's brother. Apologies if that came out the wrong way. Phoenix, I would love to see a quick take on Taylor versus Serrano from the boys. Clay saying Figueiredo the younger kept doing the opposite of my bets. This may be too soon to fade him, but I'm resolved to keep doing it until it pays off. I don't love Francisco Figueiredo very much. I took him at the start of the week because, again, it's technique versus the wildness of Da Silva.
Davison, so I would hope you don't love him.
Everybody's going with Daniel Da Silva this week. So, again, listen, damn Daniel, I guess. I was on the fence at the start of the week. Have enough people convince me over.
It sounds like it.
I'll go Daniel Da Silva this week. But again, every time, or with the exception of 1 or 2 this week that I've changed my pick, and not that it's happened all that much, but I'd say I'm at an 80% rate of if I switch the pick, I lose it. So just keep that one in your back pocket.
Don't put that Maluka on me in my pick. I still have Daniel Da Silva. To the person who asked for the quick take on Taylor versus Serrano, I can give it very quick. I think Katie Taylor's quite a bit better, especially with her body punches. Now, her last 2 fights, she looks like she's slowed down just a little bit, but she's fought better fighters, I would say, than who Amanda Serrano has fought in her past 2 fights. And the interesting thing is, Katie Taylor beat Amanda Serrano's sister. Not a lot of people know that, but Serrano's sister herself was a world champion, and Taylor was able to beat her. I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight. Like, I'm genuinely super excited for it, but I think Taylor's going to win decision, mainly because of her body punching ability.
All right, Matt, so we'll move on to our next fight, and we're looking at Alexandr Romanov versus Chase Sherman. Alexandr Romanov wins this fight.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, the real question mark with this fight is, how does this version of Romanov look? We know what he looks like at 260. Physically, he does look completely different, so I'm curious, are we going to see a faster version? Is he going to have better movement on the feet? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, he's over a minus 2,000 favorite, and if Chase Sherman wins, then listen, I will... I don't know, I'll do one of those hot sauce shots. That didn't make any sense. Hot sauce shots I will do
both your arms in the
a
air.
Da Bomb hot sauce shot. So how about that? I was thinking about it too much. Like, I'm worried in my head that Chase Sherman's not going to be able to do it. But if it does happen, I would be very surprised. Ricardo saying, which two of you guys think is the biggest locks for the night? Manpreet does the locks, we don't.
Every time I say that L word, someone immediately loses by first round stoppage. So.
Yeah, I got nothing for locks, never. Krzysztof Jotko's taking on Gerald Meerschaert. And Matt, Joe Meerschaert, this is a safe space for Meerschaert fans. Like, whether we pick him to win or we don't pick him to win, I absolutely love Joe Meerschaert and his fighting style. And it was 9 wins in the UFC, all of them by finish, and he's right up there. Anderson Silva has 11 middleweight finishes in the UFC. Joe Meerschaert has 9. He's nipping at those heels. He's mixing up the angles, just like Drizzy Drake. He's going over to Fusion XL. He's training with Mike Perry to get ready for this fight.
He's making a change today.
And he's taking on Krzysztof Jotko, one of the most boring fighters in the UFC who loves to fight to a decision.
But he is very good.
Effective.
Exactly. And that's the crazy thing about Jotko. He's been in or near the rankings for a very long time now, and he has been competitive with a lot of the top fighters in this division. It just feels like for Jotko, every time I start to believe in him, that's when he does start to look a little bit unimpressive in some of his performances. And when you don't think he's going to be very good, that's when he lands 4 wheel kicks in a row, and you're like, darn, he is pretty good on the feet. Exactly. This fight against Meerschaert is so strange, though, because Meerschaert has a huge advantage in the grappling, but Jotko's one of these fighters who we never really see his defensive grappling because his footwork and his movement is so good. And I gotta be honest, I think Meerschaert could probably beat more guys in the top 15 than Krzysztof Jotko can. His style is more towards finishing. If you make a mistake, Gerald Meerschaert's the type of guy who can make you pay for it instantly. I just think stylistically, this is a really bad matchup for Meerschaert. He's not the best of wrestlers. He doesn't have the greatest footwork himself, so I think he's gonna have a really hard time cutting off the cage against Jotko. And like you said, no one would be happier if Gerald Meerschaert won by first round guillotine than this guy right here. But I just don't think he's going to get into that position with someone like Jotko. So I do think Jotko can probably win this by 30-27 decision. We all know how Jotko wins his fights.
Tristan's Darren up top saying it's mindless dribble. You tuned in, so it's on you. But realistically, when it comes to this one, Matt, Krzysztof Jotko is one of those guys that he's so defensively sound when he gets taken down. Now, you are until you're not, and you take on Gerald Meerschaert. But against a guy like Meerschaert, who had one small left arm and one normal-sized right arm. When he made the move down from 205 to 185, Jotko proved that he could pop right back up. Now, whether you thought Jotko won that fight or you thought Serkinov won that fight, listen, it's just like Brian Adams.
Jotko won that fight.
Cuts like a knife. And listen, if you saw it either way, whatever. But when it does come down to this one, Gerald Meerschaert, not the most fleet of foot when it comes to his striking. Krzysztof Jotko is a guy that can strike on the back foot, does have very good lateral movement because most of his fights are spent backing up going like this. So he is very good at it, but it's definitely not going to be one of the more exciting fights if it is a Jotko win. The fans have Jotko 55%, so 45% on Meerschaert. And it seems like a lot of people over there in the comments section kind of going, both ways about it. Kyle Kelly saying only cool thing about Jotko is his Vegeta tattoo.
That is pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. But again, for Jotko, he's always going to be around the rankings just because it doesn't really matter who the opponent is. He's going to fight in the exact same style. Like, he could run a marathon backwards and beat most people who are running forwards. That's just his style. I don't think this is going to be the best of fights by any stretch of the imagination, unless Gerald can get it to the mat sometime early.
Gerald Meerschaert, submission specialist. All right, we move on to our next fight with Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connelly. And it's a weird fight because this is Tristan Connelly's 3rd time out in the UFC, 2nd fight at featherweight. The other one, well, that was at welterweight and he beat Michel Pereira. A fight that he can take to his grave. Like, that's one of those ones that if you have a mantle at your house, you go to the UFC's website, you go to their store, Tristan Connelly then spends all of his money on the belt, and he just puts it up there. And this is the time that I beat Michel Pereira.
It's like, you know in the NHL how every now and then, it rarely happens, they'll just call up some random guy? That's what his win over Pereira reminds me of. It's like, hey, this is you probably exceeding your expectations, but it's still a great moment, and it's still something we can all get really excited about.
Tristan Connelly was last year's baseball's Yermin Mercedes, where it was like, wow, look at this guy. He's the next big catcher. And then a month later, it was like, wow, he retired because he got sent down, but now he's back again? Well, Tristan Connelly, in his last fight, taking on Pat Sabatini, rallied in the 3rd round, but definitely didn't win the 1st or the 2nd rounds. Darren Elkins, in his last fight, took on Cub Swanson, whose hands were glued to his knees. And in that one, Darren Elkins could not figure out the weird arm angles of Cub Swanson. We've seen the highest of highs in the 6-fight win streak that Darren Elkins had at one point. The lowest of lows when he loses to Volkanovski, and then a slew of fighters in a row. It's a tough fight for both guys, but the trouble that I have on this one is the fact that Tristan Connelly, neck surgery before the Pat Sabatini fight, and then after the Pat Sabatini fight, corrective neck surgery where he had a fight booked before. It's been a long road back, and neither one of these guys are young by any stretch.
I agree with everything you said, but this also has to be said. Tristan Connelly had surgeries done by professionals. Darren Elkins has just taken a lot of damage in the cage throughout his career. Done by professionals, but not the same kind of damage that a person acquires. And I do worry about Connelly and sort of his range of movement after some of these surgeries, and I think it's a really good point to bring up. But I do think that just the overall damage that Darren Elkins has eaten throughout his career, and this isn't a pun using his nickname, it's just the truth. He's been hit clean a lot in his UFC career. And go back and watch the Volkanovski fight. I know Volkanovski didn't finish him. He dropped him, 6 times in that fight? Like, he really hurt Darren Elkins bad in that matchup. And I really do feel like, okay, we were starting to see Darren Elkins get a little old. He was on a great win streak, but we all kind of realized what his ceiling was in the division. Like, maybe on his best day, he'd be able to beat the 6th ranked guy, but we can probably calm down if we get any higher up in the rankings. I feel like after that fight, though, it took whatever tread was left on the tires from Darren Elkins. And it sucks to say that, but if you do look at the fights after, like that Ricardo Lamas TKO was terrible. Darren Elkins gets completely outstruck on the feet, and by the end of the 3rd round, he couldn't even really defend himself, so they just sort of stopped the fight. And I do feel like the Cub Swanson loss, that was another one where he gets wobbled and he just can't recover after he initially gets hurt. I think if Connelly does hurt Elkins, I just don't know if Elkins can recover back into the fight after he does get wobbled or hurt.
Trouble is, we're discounting, and we're not even discounting, but we're not even talking about the Derek Minner fight. Derek Minner, Tristan Connelly fight in a very, very similar way. Got to get the takedown, got to get the grappling involved, and Darren Elkins was able to finish Derek Minner in that fight. Looked a lot bigger than him too in that one, and Connelly, He has size on a lot of guys. At 145, he had one fight there in 2015. I think that was his last fight at featherweight. Before the Sabatini fight, he lost that one by decision. So I'm eager to see this one. At Fight Night Picks, 55% of the fans going with Darren Elkins. And the last thing that I'll say about this one, I'll just touch on the odds because I don't know where they are anymore. Darren Elkins minus 175 favorite. Tristan Connelly plus 147. I do have Connelly in this one, but yeah, this is a really, really tricky one. Craig Hart saying Connelly is a great pick. Coin flip, but Connelly is a plus 150. I love that line movement. Just my 2 cents. Connelly couldn't punch his way out of a paper bag. So, listen, we can take that either way. And just my 2 cents saying that you can't switch picks because somebody misses the weight. Watch me. All right, Matt. Jared Gordon's taking on Grant Dawson. And these two guys can bang. If grappling was that. I mean, when you watch these two guys fight, for Grant Dawson, I've touched on it. There are a few fighters that reach the pinnacle of MMA or even sniff the rankings that strike like Grant Dawson and Jordan Levitt. There are very few. But sometimes you get them, and sometimes they do pop off, and sometimes they're in the same weight class. But when I do look at these two guys, again, Grant Dawson, it's like he doesn't want to get kicked, so he keeps a Muay Thai front leg, and he normally goes in for his takedowns fairly heavily. Now, Jared Gordon, great takedown defense? Not necessarily. But for Jared Gordon, well-rounded enough to continue beating guys, and now he's on this tidy little win streak. I absolutely love what I've seen out of Jared Gordon lately, and he doesn't get the respect out of anybody that he deserves.
Jared Gordon's the type of fighter who's good at everything, great at nothing, but has great cardio. And that really does help him in most fights. I always go back to the Hakron Diaz fight, and I know Diaz was very old in his career back then, but Jared Gordon beat the brakes off him and really weaponized his cardio in that matchup. He put Diaz in a lot of positions he didn't want to be in, made him work extremely hard early on, and then near the end of that fight, he really put a lot of damage on him. And I can't believe I'm saying this because Pascal Siakam genuinely hurt Joel Embiid, but it's like playing Embiid in the playoffs. Make him work really, really hard in those first 2 quarters, hope you tire him out in the second half, and just make him work on defense. That's sort of what Jared Gordon does as a game plan, and against a guy like Grant Dawson, that might just work. But this is what I'm going to bring up, and I'm happy you brought up Grant Dawson and Jordan Levitt's striking style, because who's another fighter who we bring up a lot when we talk about Grant Dawson? Pat Sabatini. And Sabatini's a guy who was in their category, I would say, for striking, but let's be honest, he's made some massive improvements, especially as of late. And if you look at his fight against TJ Laramie, he's got kicks to the body. He looked really good in that fight on the feet. So I do think there's a world out there where maybe Grant Dawson can have a similar kind of transformation where he does start to add more things on the feet, but I do think right now, the way this fight goes, Jared Gordon's a little bit better on the feet. He just doesn't have crazy power to hurt Grant Dawson. And I do think that that's going to allow Dawson to still maintain himself, still be in the fight no matter what. And if Dawson gets on top of Jared Gordon for even 2 minutes, I'm not joking, he's going to damage Gordon enough to where his cardio might be really good at the start of the fight, but I think it's going to get worse and worse and worse for every minute Grant Dawson spends in that top position.
At 506 tuning in right now, you got 161 likes. That's pretty darn good, so we certainly do appreciate it. Now, I will say with this one, start of the week, breaking the fourth wall, I was kind of on the fence with this fight, and you look at it for Grant Dawson, longtime Glory MMA and fitness guy until he's not. So about 10 weeks ago, he moved over to American Top Team. Imagine training with, Mateusz Gamrot. Is he going to fight Arman Tsarukyan, or is that just a rumor that's going to go on for the,
I'm just going to say it right now. Spoiler alert, that's going to be on a Fight of the Night screen in the future.
Oh,
without a doubt.
Grant Dawson minus 187 favorite right now. Jared Gordon plus 156. And Craig Hart's scary talking about the money lines. Chad saying Dawson inside the distance. And then over at Fight Night Picks, 71% of the fans going with Grant Dawson to get the win. I do have Grant Dawson in this one. I think he's got a little bit of a... I don't know. It's hard to quantify. If the rating scale was out of a 10 for the grappling, just grappling in general, I would say Grant Dawson's at an 8, Jared Gordon's at a 6. When it comes to wrestling, Jared Gordon's at a 6, Grant Dawson's at a 6 until the third round, and then when it's in the third round, he's at a 2. Because you saw what happened to Grant Dawson's last fight against Ricky Glenn, where he goes for a takedown, doesn't get it, pulls guard, gets dominated, 10-8'd in the third round. So I can't get that image out of my head. I know, again, rallied even more in the Leonardo Santos fight before he finishes him, but I just don't really have a great idea of Grant Dawson as these fights go on, because I expected more out of him moving up to 155 with the delay issues.
I'm going to disagree on that. I think at 145 he can be world champ. Maybe not world champ, that's a bit of hyperbole, but I think he can be top 10 at 145. At 155, I don't think he can come close to the rankings, just because his size doesn't help him at this weight class. When you're the big guy at 145, you get on top of people and you dominate them. When you're the average size guy, if not slightly smaller than average size at lightweight, your wrestling isn't as big of an advantage. Guys can buck you off if they're a lot more athletic. Could you imagine if Grant Dawson fought Mateusz Gamrot, their size difference? Gamrot's huge. He's basically a welterweight, and Grant Dawson physically does match up well with a lot of 145ers.
Derek, hitting up that super chat. We certainly appreciate you. Appreciate the info, guys. Crushed last week's card. Let's do it again. That would be lovely. So, Matt, we'll move on to our next fight, and we have Andre Fili taking on Joanderson Brito. And for Joanderson Brito, Dana White said this guy could be the next great Brazilian star. Then he took on Bill Algeo and got 30-27. So, it's tough, right? I look at this fight being high enough up. We always talk about it with Fight Night Picks, and I know myself and John Franklin do an early stoppage about card placement. What it means, this is sandwiched on the main card. It's one of those ones that people are going to catch. Joanderson Brito's a wild man, finishing abilities for days, also can get controlled on the ground until he doesn't. He just powers guys off. And when it comes to his striking, he can get out volumed, he can get out pointed, but if he's able to go in there and throw his hammers, he can knock guys out too. So I love watching the man himself, Joanderson Brito, fight. But Andre Fili is a steady Eddie, and it really is tough when you look at the litany of great fighters that Fili's fought, not necessarily beat, but he's been in the cage with. You have to respect that level of, gamesmanship / veteranship that belongs to Andre Fili.
You really set everything up for me, if I'm being honest. So, okay, Joanderson Brito can struggle with rangy guys who have decent volume on the feet. I think Andre Fili can be that guy sometimes. Now, I worry about his volume a little bit, but still, he is in that type of fighter. Oh, and Brito can get controlled on the mat? Well, here's the cool thing about Andre Fili. No one talks about it, but when I think of Fili, I don't think of him as a wrestling-first fighter, but I definitely think about the takedown attempts he employs in a lot of his fights. He is not afraid to go for an offensive takedown if things aren't going his way on the feet, and I expect him to go for quite a few of them against Joanderson Brito, because if anything, is a big advantage for Andre Fili is his cardio in this matchup. I think Fili can stay the same version of himself from minute 1 in this fight to minute 15 in this fight. He had a fairly competitive fight with Sadiq Youssef not that long ago, and I feel like that's an important thing to bring up because I think we all realize just how talented of a fighter Youssef is, and I don't think Joanderson Brito comes into that conversation. Now, I 100% agree with you. Could Brito land one of those big overhands, hurt Fili, and maybe, I don't know, finish him with a submission on the mat? It could happen, but we've seen Fili against guys like Calvin Kattar, Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez, like world-class fighters at this weight class, and like you said, has he beat them all? No, but I do think that experience is very important at the UFC level, and that's why I like Andre Fili in this fight.
Tovan wants to see it as touchy right before the fight, and he gets really creepy about it. Listen, Tovan, there's got to be a coordinated effort by the UFC's production staff to make that happen too, but yeah, he doesn't lean into it, you're right. So you do look at this fight. I mean, again, Brito, as a guy that I was really high on coming into the UFC, now he opens a plus 215, plus 197. Andre Fili opened a minus 255, minus 242. So, listen, a lot of the comment section are going with Andre Fili. At Fight Night Picks, 82% of the fans going with Fili. I think it's an opportunity where you can buy low on a Joanderson Brito that still has a high ceiling. He also just became a father a few weeks ago, so that changes things for a lot of fighters. And I don't think it's to a detriment either. So when I look at this fight, again, Brito's got the finishing abilities. Fili's got a decision ability. I do have Andre Fili here. I will say that.
Yeah, so do I.
And I love watching Joanderson Brito fight, so hopefully it's a good one, Matt. The entire world disagrees with us on this fight.
I don't know why, though. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I've also seen a lot of people zag on this one. Hear me out, everyone. Andre Arlovski is as old as my dad was when I was in grade 9. I was advanced into my life at that point. Andre Arlovski's been fighting in MMA for longer than I've been on this planet. I have a very hard time picking him in a matchup against a guy like Jake Collier, who, again, is he going to be the best heavyweight? Not by any means. But when we talk about him fighting like a middleweight in the heavyweight division, I don't just say that because he used to be a middleweight. He's someone who relies on his footwork, uses his offensive grappling, has a really tricky grappling style. He's good at wrestling, and he's got good cardio at this weight class. I think those are the things you need to beat someone like Andre Arlovski. And hey, could Arlovski leg kick 1-2 and Caitlin Chukagian his way to another win? He could, but I really do think Jake Collier has a well-rounded enough game to where he's going to make Andre Arlovski work at more than just his striking in this fight. He's going to test his grappling, test some of his clinch control, and that's why I like Jake Collier in this one.
First lie, okay, again, I understand. We're on a different side of the fence than everybody else. We don't have to get mad at each other. Like, if we get it wrong, we get it wrong, and you guys get it right. That's fine. I mean, listen, Ice Viking saying we zig when you guys zag. That's fine.
And for Phoenix, the difference is Andre Arlovski hasn't beaten a single guy in the top 15 in about 7 years because he only fights prospects at this point.
And don't get it twisted.
Beats guys in the top 15 in his sleep. That's the difference.
Don't get it twisted. Jake Collier's not going to go on a run in the top 15. If he does, I'll be the first one on the hype train. Choo-choo. I'll make a video like I did for Rodolfo Vieira at the start where I'm calling up the fan club and dialing everybody up. But when I do look at this fight, listen, Jake Collier throws a great amount of volume, can grapple and make fights slow on his own accord because he's a big guy. Andre Arlovski has that, like, tricky... He does that. Like,
he shimmies like he's Steph Curry.
He throws the punches, comes back, shimmies, and then he's back at it. He's got good head movement, doesn't get knocked out lately. Hasn't got knocked out lately. But when it comes to Jake Collier, he throws a great amount of volume and a good leg kick. I know Andre Arlovski's like fighting in a mirror. I thought Jared Vanderaa beat him. Certain people did as well. But listen, the Carlos Felipe fight was close too. Those are the guys that Andre Arlovski's fighting. Jake Collier's in that category. To me, Jake Collier has better volume. And again, I see the mention of Tanner Boser as a decent win for Arlovski. It is. At the time, I thought Boser won. But then I rewatched it and I thought Arlovski won. All of these fights are too close for comfort. And I know...
That's why I don't know why you stick your flag all the time.
Fight to go the distance is like -2 something in this one. But for me... Yeah, I've got Jake Collier. And I have Jake Collier in the question mark kicks parlay as well. So, realistically, I've got Collier to plus 115. I've got Natan Levy minus 200. That comes out to a plus 222. I might be an absolute wild man over here by myself with my pop and pop.
You gotta have some confidence in these, Craig.
But yeah, I'm having fun. So I've got Collier and I've got Levy. But yeah, I do have Jake Collier in this one as an underdog based on the volume. Will I be wrong? We'll find out at the end of the night. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I also have Collier in this matchup. Should be a fun fight, though.
All right, Matt. So just my 2 cents. We had a little bit of fun, and we said that when we look at this fight, you know, the weight miss, will it make a change? Can't change picks if the guy misses weight. But listen, Malone Hart hitting up that super chat. Y'all are great. Thanks for the information. Keep it up. Malone Hart is now the MVP of the show. So Malone Hart, certainly appreciate you really bringing the show to the forefront and hitting up that super chat. And everybody that set up the super chat and everybody that set up the chat so far,
we thank you.
We do thank you. It means a lot. So Matt, when we look at this fight, Marlon Vera makes weight. Marlon Vera's a fiery guy. Marlon Vera was not happy that Rob Font missed weight, nor would I be. But Marlon Vera's probably happy that he gets an extra 20%, right?
He probably prefers his opponent made weight, if we're being honest.
I know, but listen, Rob Font's probably, because again, Vegas, they're never going to tell us, so we have to guess. But I'm assuming Rob Font gets paid more than Marlon Vera. So that extra 20% of Rob Font's purse is probably nice. But comes to this fight, Matt, Rob Font, great jab, great boxing. Not a huge kicker, can wrestle, but in a matchup against Marlon Vera, probably not, because Vera's quite good at the old jiu-jitsu. And when it comes to Marlon Vera, good jiu-jitsu, doesn't work against some guys. Good boxing, better kicking, but he really just has to bring it all together. He's really in that when Gilbert Burns fought at 155.
And
that's Marlon Vera.
I think that's a great example to bring up too, because if you look at what Vera does, if we just isolate all of his skills, he's a good boxer, he's a good kickboxer, he has good clinch control, he's very aggressive in the clinch, he loves his elbows, great jiu-jitsu, and a decent wrestler, I would say. I know he struggles defensively, but still, if we're just talking about wrestling as a whole, I would say Vera's a good wrestler. You're right though, he does just sort of he'll be really active for like a minute, and then he'll sort of take a minute off, and then he'll be really active for another minute. There just isn't a great flow to his fight yet, and I do feel like once he does find that good flow, that's when he will sort of realize his 100% potential. But if you go back and look at any Marlon Vera fights, this is the one big takeaway. It's a lot like Dillian Whyte before he fought Tyson Fury. Even when Dillian Whyte won good fights, he would get rocked in every single fight he's ever had. Marlon Vera gives away rounds like it's going out of style, even in fights that he wins by spectacular finish in the third round, because people forget, he was known as the comeback kid in his first sort of UFC run, had a couple losses, then he fixed his pacing, and then if you go back and you watch the Frankie Edgar fight, it was pretty close going into the third round before he was able to land that front kick, and maybe Vera was on his way to winning that third round, so he probably wouldn't have won the decision 2-1, but still, if you're having a close fight with a guy like Frankie Edgar, who's definitely closer to the end of his career than the start right now, I worry about you going up against a prime Rob Font. But this is the problem. Rob Font, like you said, relies on his jab, has a really good chin so he can stay in the pocket, and he's got phenomenal cardio. I question all those things when you have a really bad weight cut like he had too. And the thing is, when people miss by a half pound or a pound, people like to say, oh, well, they almost made it. Oh, they barely missed weight. 2.5 pounds, and really 3.5 pounds if we're being honest, because like it's a main event slot. Normally if you're fighting for the title in a main event slot, you're expected to make the official weight, and it sounds better for me to say he missed by 3.5 pounds, but you get the idea. When you miss by 2.5 pounds, that's very significant. So I do worry about his gas tank and his ability to eat a shot going into this fight. So my heart still might say Rob Font because I do like his style against the style of Marlon Vera. I put a lot of stock into that weight miss, and that's why I am switching my pick to Marlon Vera.
So, I mean, you look at it for Rob Font, and we talked about this at the start of the week. This is Marlon Vera's first 5-round fight. Like, the guy's 27-1, and you think, well, Craig, you must have fought 5-round fights on the come-up. Nope, didn't.
He's been around for so long, which is incredible to think.
He has. So you look at it for Rob Font, and again, the Cody Garbrandt fights all 5 rounds. Jose Aldo, all 5 rounds. And now we're into an all 5-rounder unless somebody gets a finish. But again, it is another main event. It's 5 rounds. And if you remember back a number of pay-per-views ago, we had a good 5-round fight between, well, you know, Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler.
It was a good fight.
This could be like that. But Matt, again, we look at this fight, Rob Font, Marlon Vera, a couple guys that can bang. So you're changing the pick based on that weight miss?
I am. And again, I don't love doing it because I think Rob Font on his best day can beat Marlon Vera on his best day. And again, we don't switch our picks often, and normally when we do, it ends up being wrong. So that's why I feel like I really have to explain this one. When you miss weight, it is going to affect your cardio because you have less water in your body, and that's a very important thing to have in your body. And it does affect your ability to eat a punch. It's happened many, many times. People have bad weight cuts, and then they can't eat a shot. Those are two things that Rob Font really does rely on. And again, I know I brought up a lot at the start of the week that I don't worry about Marlon Vera's one-punch power as much as Jose Aldo's, but let's say Jose Aldo hits 30% harder than Marlon Vera. I know it's hard to just put a number on it, but let's just say 30%. If you think Rob Font is less durable, it's going to make Marlon Vera's punching power maybe be on par with someone like Jose Aldo. So maybe we do see them in the pocket. Vera could crack him with a big shot in the feet. And I do agree with you 100%. If this fight goes to the mat for any period of time, like, this would be the worst fight Rob Font could ever wrestle in. Because I do think he has the offensive wrestling advantage. But the second it hits the mat, Marlon's so active. He can get on top, threaten with submissions. It just would not be the fight for for Font to go for a takedown. So I'm switching my pick to Marlon Vera, but that's how good of a fight I think this will be.
Kyle O.M. hitting up the Super Chat. Watching any boxing tonight, fellas? No, because I'm getting ready for UFC 274. I don't have time for it. Donald E. Guys! Big Super Chat saying, happy Cheeto Day, my dudes. Now, Donald E. Guys, now we can elaborate on it. Yeah, in the comment section was hot and heavy on Cheeto before the Rob Font weight miss, so probably more so now. And Wayne Kerr the second, Vera's going to pressure and finish Font in the 4th or the 5th. Again, he's never fought into those rounds in his career.
I do agree with a lot of people in the chat, though, if I'm being honest. I think he's going to have great cardio in those rounds.
So do I, because he always comes on strong, and in the 3rd round, very strong. What's that going to look like in the 4th and the 5th, especially against a guy who missed weight? So we have had people miss weight in main events not that long ago in the past calendar year that have gone on to win as well. But when I look at this one, I consider the style, I switch the pick as well over to Marlon Vera. If I'm on the fence and then a guy who's 35 misses weight, who doesn't fight very often, but now fights more in 5-rounders that should make the weight easier, it really is odd to me. We have a look at Fight Night picks on the votes for this one. 62% going with Marlon Vera to win, and I'll have a look at the odds for fun. Realistically, I'm just going to be watching this one as it is, but Font throughout the week, minus 136, minus 122 right now, plus 101 for Marlon Vera. So I'd say by the time they step into the cage, it'll probably be even.
I would think, and again, that just speaks to how well matched this main event was. The weight miss does worry me, that's why I'm going to Marlon Vera, but again, it's going to be an incredible main event. It's probably going to go late too, so there's the best kinds.
All right, Matt. So, as we always do with Fight Night Picture question mark kicks, we stack the deck once more. Thank everybody that hit up that super chat. Donald E. Guys, Malone Hart, Kyle O.M., Wayne Kerr II. If I missed you, you're not at the top, and those are the names that are still in my memory bank, even though they just gave you the pictures, so I'm trying my best here. But everybody that did that, we appreciate it, and if you can't, just toss a like. It really does mean a lot. This has been a heck of a show, and again, 274 is coming up next weekend, so we'll have question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims. We'll also have, obviously, the full card video, and we'll have Fight Night Pick Sidekick, which you can tune into the main card. Hang out with us, we offer the commentary. 275? Won't be able to have a sidekick, but 274, we will.
I'm so excited for the main event next weekend. I gotta be honest, I don't think there's a fighter I enjoy watching more than Charles Oliveira. Like, when people talk about mixed martial arts is the last word in this. And what Charles Oliveira does is straight up artistic. Like, it's wild how technical he can be at every single different discipline in MMA. But here's the great thing about Oliveira. He seems to get hurt early in every single fight and then turns it up like crazy. When you're fighting a guy like Justin Gaethje, that might not be the best of game plans, but I don't know how that will not be like a fight of the year style fight when it's all said and done.
All right, Matt. So we'll go down to the bottom. Gina Mazany, Shanna Young. Because again, now I'll hide this. This fight, Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Candelario, no longer on the card. Nolan King tweeted it out. I put it in our story, but this fight is off. So we move on to our next one. Gina Mazany, Shanna Young, both of us going with Alaska's Mazany, but it's a sketchy fight.
We just think the wrestling is probably going to be the X factor on this one. Young is by far the better striker, so if she goes out there and just puts on a clinic on the feet for 15 minutes, wouldn't be all that surprised, but I still like Mazany.
All right, so we move on to our next one. Natan Levy, Mike Breeden going with Natan Levy in this one.
I like Levy in this fight, but it is a close one.
I've got Levy as one half of the QMK parlay. I like him. Gabe Green taking on Yohan Lainesse. Matt, we're on the other side of the fence on this one with Gabe Green.
I think someone's getting knocked out. I really do. I don't see this going to the judges. Both guys are finishers, be it on the feet or on the mat, but I do like Gabe Green.
We move into our next one. De Silva against Figueiredo. I've switched the pick, which normally doesn't work out, but I get Daniel De Silva. Normally doesn't work out this year. In previous years, it's worked out great, but this year, it has not.
I just don't think Francisco Figueiredo's a guy. You know? He's like campaign when he was on the Raptors a really long time ago. Like, you don't really blame them for getting rid of him. You see how good he is now, and maybe Francisco can do the same thing. Maybe he can go to another organization, reinvent himself, and work his way back. But I do like De Silva in this one.
All right, Matt. We move into our next one. Romanov taking on Sherman. Got Romanov. Krzysztof Jotko's taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Going with Krzysztof Jotko, not the sexy pick, though.
Exactly. He's probably going to win one of the more boring decisions you've ever seen, but Jotko's going to Jotko.
Yikes. Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connelly. Got Tristan Connelly here, who's an underdog.
So do I, even though I'm on the fence, I'm not going to lie. Normally I try to be pretty straight and narrow on my picks, but this could go either way. It's weird. If they grapple more, I could see it favoring Darren Elkins, but I really do think if he eats one big shot, he just won't be able to recover and get back into the fight.
It's going to be a tricky one. Tristan Connelly, not necessarily known for the
not
striking.
At all.
Jared Gordon, Grant Dawson, going with the younger man here in Grant Dawson. This should be a fun one, though.
I think Grant Dawson at 145 could be pretty much anybody at the weight class. At 155, I do worry. And Jared Gordon's the type of guy who's going to find a weakness in your game and find a way to exploit it, but I still like Grant Dawson.
Joel McAllister hitting up the super chat, going with Gaethje, Rose, and Chandler. Good luck tonight, everyone. Keep doing your thing, gents.
And that's an incredible fight we haven't talked about yet. Tony Ferguson making his return against Michael Chandler.
Hey, listen. They made, there we go. They made the poster. They all made the poster. So
Nice.
that
How
should
could they
be,
not? That's going to be a great
That
fight.
should be a good one there. And so we'll move on to our next one. Feely and Britu, both of us with Andre Feely in this one.
Just the steadier fighter.
Should be a good one. I can see Joe Anderson Britu going out there making a statement. But Jake Collier taking on Arlovsky. I've got Collier's one half QMK parlay, but again, other side of the fence compared to everybody else on this fight.
It's just wild how long Andrei Arlovsky's been able to stay competitive at the UFC level. I know I don't have him in this fight, but like, it's genuinely incredible to me that he's been in the UFC for like 20 years now. It's really wild that he's been able to stay relevant for so long. And I know he went away, he fought Fedor and Affliction, but still, for the most part, when you think about Andrei Arlovsky, you think about UFC heavyweights. I do like Jake Collier in this fight, though.
All right, and then in the main event, both of us switching the pick. Like, these things don't happen very often, but going with Marlon Vera over Rob Font, which is scary. And if we get it wrong, just that switch of the pick, it just seems silly. But Font missing the weight, Vera, big opportunity, coming off a giant win over Legend, too. Like, you can't understate that. Again, first round, Frankie Edgar won. Second round, close. I had Edgar, but you can make an argument. Third round, it didn't matter. The argument's out the window. Vera with that crazy knockout. So he does have a great opportunity here. If he's working in that leg kick, we know how good that can be in his fights. And for Rob Font, slow down a little bit of that boxing. He will switch stances, but we'll see how this one plays out. I love the fight.
Now I'm going to even argue even more from Marlon Vera. We've seen him fight a lot of boxers in the UFC, and his kicks normally do help him quite a bit. Andre Ewell got shut down by the kicks of Marlon Vera, and even if you go back, a lot of people forget. Goodness, I forget his
Sean
name.
O'Malley did
Brad
too.
Pickett, that's the name I'm looking for. Brad Pickett, a primary boxer. I know he was older in his career, that was his retirement fight, but Marlon Vera was able to use his kicks really effective against him too, so he has fought some similar fighters to Rob Font, but again, I'm so excited for this main event.
It should be a great time. As I mentioned, we're going to have the full card video out soon for UFC 274. Question mark kicks next weekend. The side kick for the big card. And it should be a big one because, again, average age on that main card is, without accounting for the months, just taking them all up, adding them and dividing, 35.7 years old. Everybody's very, very old.
What an awful way to sell the main card of that, Craig. I'm not going to lie.
They are so old. But it should be a very, very fun one nonetheless. You've got Cowboy Cerrone taking on Joe Lozon. You've got another couple of old guys in Michael Chandler taking on Tony Ferguson. You wouldn't think it, but 36 versus 38. Wild. And then you also have Vince St. Preux taking on Shogun, who a childhood legend because I was a weird kid. That was that.
I just can't get the thought. It's a really popular gift that's gone around where it's Shogun slipping on a skateboard and then OSP hitting him with a shot from their first fight. Why is Shogun fighting in that fight? I agree. I love watching Mauricio Shogun Rua fight. It brings back great childhood memories of when I first got into this sport. But it's sad to see him still compete. Like, it'd be like seeing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar try to put on a jersey and go back out there putting up a skyhook. Probably could. Just not the same guy anymore, and that's the problem with Shogun. Like, you want him to be the guy he used to be, but it just isn't the same anymore. And I guess a guy like Paul Craig, you can get hurt, don't get me wrong, but OSP is a thunderous puncher at any weight class he fights in, be it heavy heavyweight or light heavyweight. So that's just a tough fight for Shogun.
All right, Matt. Well, we'll look forward to that next weekend. Thanks everybody who tuned in. All of the super chats, the likes, they definitely mean a lot to us. It's a lot of fun for us to do these question mark kick shows. Johnny hitting up the super chat before the end of the show. Jotko, Levy, Connelly, Dawson, and Feely. Thank you, Johnny, for hitting up that super chat before we go. But again, we certainly appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you can check out that content coming up next week. As we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.
Have a great Saturday, everyone.
Great show. Thank you, folks.
But it is the